All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the New Movers Party and panel discussion. It's great to have you here. We really appreciate you spending some time with us, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We've done this similar panel discussion at a number of Free State Project events. It's always very well received. It's a lot of fun, get a lot of good interaction with the crowd, and really the idea is to answer your questions about life in New Hampshire. And we have some special panelists with us today, people who are early movers. We have Gordon Kemp, who lives out in Alstead, which is in the Monadnock region. We have Molly Smith, who lives in the Seacoast, AKA Free Coast area. And we have Gabby Maylock, who is in Manchester. So these three and myself are the panelists today. And really the idea is to share some of our experiences with those of you. I see a number of people in the room who are brand new to New Hampshire, like the Ramseys, and some who haven't quite moved yet. So we're going to do our best to fill you in on life, quality of life in the Free State, and give you some pointers on things you might want to do to accelerate your adaptation to the new state. A little bit of housekeeping. Everybody is muted, but we want to encourage questions. So there's a chat room at the bottom of your screen. If you click on chat, you can send a message to Amy. Amy is the keeper of the questions today, and we will check in with her periodically and review some of the questions and get those answered for you. We have some really diverse experiences and backgrounds today, and I think you're going to get a lot from it. So let me start by sharing the screen. We're going to do a little slideshow about not only moving to New Hampshire, but obviously living here, because some of you have already made the move, and we just want to touch on things like places you might want to consider living and things to do in networking and getting involved with your community. I'm Mark Warden, owner of Porcupine Real Estate. We also have Gabby Maylock. She's been here, I think, 2 years today or 2 years this week, and she lives in Manchester. Gordon Kemp, we introduced earlier. He lives in the small but great town of Alstead, which is about 20 minutes north of Keene, and in a very rural town, and home of one of the best barbecue restaurants north of the Mason-Dixon line called Kirby's Q. And Molly Smith, she and her family live in Newmarket out in the Seacoast. So we'll ask each of them to share with us their experiences on why they chose where they live. And this next slide, it has a fun little map. If you're new to New Hampshire, you may not know that they typically break it into these regions. There are 10 counties, but counties aren't that important in New Hampshire. More people can self-identify with the regions. North Crunchy, where there are more moose than people. Lakes region, which is around Lake Winnipesaukee, Winnisquam. Upper Valley, which would include the Hanover, West Lebanon area, and Dartmouth College. Monadnock, named after Mount Monadnock, and that's the southwest corner of the state. Merrimack Valley would include the towns up and down the Merrimack River, which are the biggest cities in New Hampshire, namely Manchester, Nashua, and Concord. These are all old mill cities that were built along the river 140 years ago, when this part of the world was the biggest producer of textiles in the world. And then, of course, the Free Coast. Usually, it's really officially called the Seacoast, but Amy changed its graphic for our purposes, called the Free Coast. Anyway, why don't we start with Gabby? Let us know why you chose Manchester when you moved to New Hampshire, what you like about it, maybe things you might not like about it as well.
Yeah, so I picked Manchester the Merrimack, which is in the Merrimack Valley of New Hampshire. And I selected this city because when I moved here, I was young, single, and I was really looking to integrate into the Liberty community. My goal was to meet as many people as possible. And because I was single, I was looking for a partner. And so I ended up finding that when I moved here, which is awesome. But that's why I picked it, because I wanted the higher population. I also ended up getting a job in the city too, and I wanted to be able to walk to work, and I'm able to do that. And it was just, I think, the best option for me when it comes to getting my feet wet in New Hampshire. I might move to a different city later, but it was a perfect landing spot for me. And I also love the different restaurants, the culture, and overall just the social life here. I think there's a bit more than in other parts of the state.
Is it true you moved here without a job and you found one quickly? And how did you find that? And what did you think of the overall job market when you arrived?
Yeah, so I actually had a job lined up before I moved. I knew I was going to move here, but I was hoping to get a job lined up beforehand, and it ended up working out that way. So I got the job, and then I found a place to rent. And for me, it wasn't that hard to find a job. I maybe sent out like 6 resumes and to places in Manchester specifically, and I got an offer within like 2 weeks of sending the resume out. So it was actually really quick. Either way, if I didn't have a job, I would have ended up here, but having that job lined up made my whole move much easier.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing. I live in Manchester as well. I chose it because it's where the most free staters are. It's great for networking, great for social activities. Also, I like politics. It's not that far from Concord, the hellhole that it is in the legislature. But it's where we have a lot of networking potential for both business and for community. Gordon, let's hear from you on why you chose where you ended up to buy your property.
Okay, so we originally moved to Wilton when we first moved here, and we actually rented for 2 years, which I recommend people do it for at least a year, because you can't really, especially if you're from farther away in the country, like you don't know anything about New Hampshire. It helps to get here and be able to travel around, and the different areas have a lot of different things to offer. So we did that for 2 years, and then we ended up in Alstead as kind of a compromise between, I wanted to live in the North Country in the middle of nowhere, and the wife wanted to go to Starbucks and Target. So we ended up 20 minutes from Starbucks and Target and 2 hours from the mountains. So that's how we, and it's an easy day trip from here back to see the in-laws in New York. We're originally from upstate New York, like actually upstate, not 5 minutes north of New York City. We're from like the Adirondacks. It's very similar culturally and geographically to here, so not much culture shock or anything. The taxes are relatively low here, so that was a deciding factor as well. Yeah, that's about it.
Let's just briefly touch on taxes, and maybe we'll come back to it, but taxes for property vary widely from town to town. So it's important when looking for a house that you take that into consideration. And if you want to spend the extra taxes for the great school system, more power to you. But for those of you who are homeschooling or going to private school, let's keep a close eye on the property tax rate for a given town. Okay, Molly, tell us a little bit about your search, where you landed, how you love it, and why you chose that area.
Okay, so my husband and I moved with our 3 kids from California. We came out 2015, I think, to visit, and quickly fell in love. We went through kind of like the Manchester area and then came over on the Free Coast, and we met some families out here. They have like a community center out here on the Free Coast. There's one in Manchester also that we hadn't made it to, but when we came out here, we were just met by groups of families and people that were excited, and they had this community space that everyone had worked hard to make happen and put together, and it was very exciting to be around people who were doing things, who were wanting something to get accomplished and doing it. So we decided pretty quickly we were going to move, and we're from California originally, so we knew we wanted to stay near the ocean. That was a big deal for us. So we're about 25 minutes away now, which is great. When we first came, we came in the winter and we rented a house in Hampton Beach. Like Gordon said, I would totally recommend renting when you get out here. It just really, you can only see so much on a trip and get to learn so much about a town on a trip. So staying in the rental, it was right on Hampton Beach. It was a beautiful location, and because it was during the winter, it was affordable. The rent, just for perspective, the rent monthly is about what they charge weekly in the summer, so it was pretty significant. And yeah, we just got a chance to drive around, visit towns. Newmarket is a little bit higher tax. They have a really great school system. We homeschool, but that is an option. So it was a little shocking to see how different taxes vary from town to town, like Mark pointed out. So being aware of that and prepared for that is, I think, helpful also.
That's awesome. And at Porcupine Real Estate, we have on our website, we have blog posts. I think Molly wrote up a blog post for us after she moved here about the winter rentals. It's really a secret that's not all that well known, but it's a great opportunity for people moving to New Hampshire to just get a feel for the state. And the rentals are fairly cheap during the winter, because these are places near the beach or near the lake that are super expensive to rent during the summer, during the high season. But the landlords would rather just have somebody there to keep the heat on basically over the winter. And they give you a discount from basically October through May, but you have to get out May 1st. But yeah, that's a real neat option for everybody. I'll remind you, if you want to ask some questions, please please send a message in chat to Amy. And I know there's one already there. We'll get to that when we get to the housing section. But some of the things we want to cover are culture, community, quality of life, recreation, outdoor activities, politics, taxes, housing, and schooling. So these are some of the things that we're going to discuss today, and we want to plant those seeds if you have specific questions. I'm going to share the slide again. And in culture, I think everybody on this call is a libertarian or Free State Project fan. So that's one of the biggest things about New Hampshire. That's why almost all of us have moved, is for the like-minded people here, for the culture. But of course, there's a lot more to it than just our community. But we want to focus today on some of the if you would, the culture or the Liberty community where you are. And Molly, let's start with you. Tell people a little bit about the Praxium and what sort of friendships you've developed since you've lived here in that area. Hit Alt A to unmute. I'll unmute you.
There you go. Thank you. So yeah, the Praxium that Mark mentioned, that's our Liberty Community Center. It's in Dover. When we came out, it was at a different location. It was kind of like it was in Portsmouth. It was in town, and it was almost kind of like a warehouse type of vibe. And now they have this beautiful property. It's got a couple acres. It used to be like a wedding hall, so now it's used for homeschooling co-ops. They've used it for there's an event going on right now, actually, for homeschoolers. But they've used it for different dinners and gatherings and fundraisers. We have a monthly market day where we get together. So there's a lot of families. There are some singles, but I would say, kind of to attest to what Gabby was saying earlier, is that's kind of like a Manchester is a little bit kind of more better for that type of vibe, probably. But we were really concerned moving out here, being from California and having no family, no friends, nobody out here that we knew. You know, that's kind of scary. And so what's that going to be like? And once we got out here, everyone has been so welcoming, generous, just amazing. And just very open, because everybody out here has done the same thing. They've all moved away for the most part. They left family, left friends, come out on their own. So there's this new community that kind of everybody has really come together and become that, you know, fill that role for each other. So I can honestly say, since moving out here, I have a much stronger community than, you know, a much larger group of friends than I did before getting here. So for us, it's been wonderful. For our family, it's been wonderful. Homeschooling with other homeschooling families been wonderful. Yeah, we've just been really happy here. We've been here for about 2.5 years, and yeah, we love it.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, you can see this slide show. Is it shared right now? This, one of the slides is about culture. And of course, we have a couple of big events, and that's just a great place to meet other early movers. You know, there are 3,000 to 4,000 Free Staters in New Hampshire right now. And Gordon, you know, you've worked as a volunteer at a couple of the Liberty Forums, maybe more than a couple. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about the key, the flagship events the Free State Project hosts, and also maybe a little bit about the culture in your small town, because I think you've been involved in local politics and you've seen that firsthand, and maybe give us a feel for how receptive the natives are to the Liberty message.
Yeah, so I'm in a bit of a unique situation here, being so close to Keene, which is, depending on how much you know about the Free State Project, Keene can be a bit of a hot topic. We have basically kind of two different groups or factions of Free Staters or libertarians in this area of the state. And there's, you know, one group that is, you know, really kind of like outspoken, I would say, and does a lot of things that make people take notice. I'm trying to be really charitable here. And then there's another group which I would consider to be in myself, which is kind of more of a low key, you know, group where you're not going to typically read about us in the news and, you know, things like that. So if you're considering where to move, if you want really one end of the spectrum or the other, the southwest end of the state is a good spot to get that. If you want, if you're more moderate in the middle, then Manchester, the seacoast is probably good. The flagship events, we have Porkfest and Liberty Forum. I'm much more familiar with Liberty Forum because I kind of took to that when we first moved here much more. It's much more, I would say, intellectual. You know, you're going to have more, you know, talks like that, more philosophical things. Porkfest has some of that too, but it's much more of a, I mean, it's in the summer, so everybody's not freezing to death. Everybody's like excited and partying, you know, type of deal. I only did Porkfest 1 year. I think I burned myself out on it because I went up and decided it would be a good idea to try to make food for everybody. And so I worked for about 16 hours a day the whole week and didn't really get to do much, but I'll probably try to come back maybe next year. As for culture, small town culture, most things in New Hampshire are very local, done on a local level. If you come from the South or even somewhere like New York, you'll be used to a lot of things being done on the county level. And county government is almost non-existent in New Hampshire. I mean, one thing that surprised me, there's no such thing as a county road in New Hampshire. It's either state roads or it's town roads. There's no such thing as the county DPW or the county roads or anything like that. So everything's very local. People are receptive. People are receptive eventually, the locals, but you have to make a good impression. You can't come in guns blazing and, you know, you guys are going to anoint me libertarian king of this small town and I'm going to, you know, mold it in my image. Like that doesn't work. And that's been tried in some places and it doesn't work. But if you come into a town and you get involved, you go to your selectmen's meeting, planning board, any ridiculous mind-numbing government meeting you can think to go to and sit through, go and do that. You're going to meet everybody in town that you need to meet. Ask some questions, mostly listen, do more listening than talking. And eventually, you know, you can start commenting on things and, you know, you sit there long enough, go to enough meetings and you'll end up appointed to things. I mean, I've only been here 5 years and they appointed me on the planning board and we just started the selectmen started a broadband committee. So I showed up for that and now I'm the chairman of that. And, you know, you just show up and volunteer. There's a very strong tradition of volunteerism in these small towns and everybody likes to see that. You know, you're getting invested in being a good neighbor. So yeah, I would say it can take a little bit of time, but if you go about it the right way, locals are very receptive. And you have to remember that a lot of times the people you're going to be dealing with honestly are like natives, like they've maybe been here for 10 or 20 years or 30 years. But I was at a meeting the other night and there was 5 or 6 of us in the room at the meeting, and there was one fella on Zoom or Google Meet, and the fella who was remotely was the only New Hampshire native. Everybody else in the room, you know, making decisions and doing things for this town were all from other states. So they're open to, you know, receiving you as being non-native. That's all I can think about that for now.
Well, let me ask you this, Gordon. When you go into town or when you go to your planning board meetings, do you open and carry? And what's the reception by townsfolk if they see a big, bad, scary black gun on your head?
It's kind of the same thing. Now it's no big deal. When I would say, you know, I went against everything that I just told you when I first got here. One of the first things I did is I went to a local, what was it, Vilas Pool Day or something at the local recreation / playground area we have here in town, which is gorgeous and wonderful. You should check it out if you're ever around here. But I was carrying there and they asked me to leave. They said, look, there's a sign that says no firearms allowed. And I said, doesn't the town own this place? And they said, yeah, but it's always been this way, you know. And I was there with my family, so I didn't make a big scene. But, you know, 2 days later, I came to the selectmen's meeting with, you know, a copy of the deed for the place that showed the town owned it, a copy of the state law that said, you know, the state preemption where towns can't enact their own gun laws and basically force them to rescind all that stuff, and they had to throw away their sign and, you know, get a new sign and everything. That ended up working out, but I would not recommend, you know, going at it like that right off the bat. That was like 2 months after I moved here.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. That's good insight. And my experience when I first moved here was that people in general are fairly friendly, but they're not gushing. It's not like down in the South where people are super friendly. I moved from Las Vegas, which is a very tourism and customer service oriented place. So I'm used to all these, you know, smiles and please and thank you. It's not the same here. But once you get to know your neighbors, typically they're very nice. They love to help you out. They're just not, they don't have the southern warm hospitality, but still they're more genuine in my experience. What we're going to do is shift gears a little bit and talk about recreation, and bring up a slide here to show you a couple things. I know there's a question about crime. Yes, we have crime in New Hampshire. If you're out in the rural areas like where Gordon lives, very little. Or if you're up north where Quentin is, I know people, because I sell houses up north sometimes, and when we get the closing, we say, where are your keys? They say, you know what, I've never locked the door. I don't know where my keys are. People don't lock their cars, they don't lock their houses in a lot of places. But if you're in the city, in Manchester, certainly, in Nashua, yeah, you got to take more precautions. We don't want to sugarcoat it. There are some problems with overdoses. There was a big heroin problem over the last few years, like a lot of parts of the country. And surprisingly, we had a lot of OD deaths right here in New Hampshire. So sad, but true. But overall, if you look at the crime statistics, they are a lot better here than wherever you're from, if you're from California, Illinois, or anywhere else. Bear with me, we're going to pivot on to recreation. And Amy said there was a question in the chat room about recreation. Go ahead, Amy. What is that?
We got a question asking, where do you go if you like to dance?
I don't know if any of the panelists want, Gabby, have you taken any dance lessons here?
I haven't. That's a wonderful question. I think one time I was driving on Willow Street and there's like a salsa dance group somewhere, but I'm not connected with any dancing scenes, but I think if you looked hard enough, you could find something.
There are a number of dance studios here in Manchester. I know there's one in Concord, and also one or two in Nashua. A number of our friends have taken dance lessons, and also they have just the group night. Also, there's some of these ethnic groups that have special dancing, Russian dancing. We have some friends who are Albanian, and they go to an Albanian dance night once a month. So if you look hard enough, you'll definitely find it. Gabby, I understand you like to hike. So what's your experience for outdoor recreation, hiking, and snow sports, if you've done those?
Yeah, so another reason why I wanted to move to New Hampshire, not just for the Free State Project, but the outdoor scene here. So obviously you have FSP here, but I also wanted to make sure I moved somewhere where I could explore the outdoors and nature. And New Hampshire is absolutely beautiful. Like every time I cross the New Hampshire border, I'm just like, oh, I'm home. And it's because of the natural beauty here. We have all the pine trees. And so I've hiked a variety of different mountains, Mount Major, Monadnock, Tecumseh. I have to start making a list of all of them because I'm starting to lose track. But there's so many different trails. Even if you aren't a hiker, there's a lot of trails in different towns. Manchester has a trail around a rail trail around Massabesic Lake. Nashua has Mines Falls Park, I believe that's what it's called. And even by the river, Merrimack River, you can walk alongside that and there's trails. So that's beautiful to experience. When it comes to skiing, I'm not a skier myself, but my fiance is. And so there's Gunstock is a great ski area, but we're also close enough to Maine, where if you did want to go to Maine, to Sugarloaf, there's some ski resorts up there. I know we have some friends in the community that do some shoe hiking, or I forget the formal term, but it's actually like hiking with certain shoes in the winter. My fiance also does disc golf, so there's that's a very popular recreational sport here, disc golf. There's different courses and just a lot of different outdoors opportunities. There's different shooting ranges as well. So you're not missing out on recreation when it comes to New Hampshire.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I know Chris Lopez is on the call with us today, and she said there are also handicap and wheelchair accessible trails out in, I think, town of Bennington. There's a great mountain there that has really great trails up in the hills, specifically for wheelchairs and people on crutches. And I know she's joined a group that has, it takes people water skiing, snow skiing, even if you're handy-capable. So those are also very available here. Got a thumbs up, thanks. Okay, I'm going to show you this calendar. By the way, Chris Lopez updates his calendar regularly. And Molly, tell us maybe some of the social events or recreation events that you guys like to do out on the Seacoast, and maybe, I know it's hard to see this the screen we're sharing, especially if you're on a phone, but tell us about the weekly mixers for the Seacoasters also, the Thursday night group.
Yeah, there's the Thursday night Seacoast get together where it changes every week. There's 4 different towns, and there was a little pause in it from COVID, but it's just now picking back up. This week is Seabrook, looks like. So what they do is they pick a restaurant in the town and make reservations, get a nice big table, and everybody comes, and there's families, and there's singles, and there's all kinds of people who have moved here, people who are visiting and happen to be in town. That's a great event to get to. There's also at the Praxium every month, there's a market day, community market, where we all get together and have vendors. Those are probably the biggest monthly ones that we have. We also have started doing a new movers potluck. The summer months, it's like a new movers picnic, and we have that once a month at the Praxium as well. And you just get a chance to come, meet, see the Praxium, see the community space that we have, and it's a lot of fun to get to meet new people and see familiar faces, and yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing. We got another question in the chat room. Somebody's asking about, let's see, I want to start a community goat farm and invite refugee communities, especially African. And she says, I know Manchester is a refugee hub. That's true. Manchester and Concord, have some refugee populations that have been repatriated here by the U.S. government. They were political refugees. Burundi is one of the African countries I know we get some people from, and there are a couple others right here in Manchester. And you'll see some of the specialty stores, food stores. We also have a lot of refugees from Nepal and Bhutan. And I had to look those up. I mean, we know Nepal is where the Himalayas are, but Bhutan is also near there. I think between the border of India and China. So yeah, it brings a lot of flavor and diversity to the largest cities in the state. And we appreciate you asking that question. I think the goat farm is a great idea. Also, goats are good at eating the weeds and poison ivy, and they'll keep your yard clean for sure. Amy, do we have any other questions in queue right now?
We do. We have a question about locations of hospitals and if doctors are in individual practices or more in groups.
Okay, any of our panelists want to address that?
In Manchester, there's a few different hospitals. There's the Alstead Hospital, and I think that's actually a network where there's a few different locations. There's the Catholic Medical Center. There's even Dartmouth Hitchcock, and they have like 5 different campuses, and that's more for primary care or specialists. That's actually where I go for my own doctor. I don't know about like individual doctors or smaller practices, but in the city you do have a few options of healthcare.
Keep in mind that the average population in New Hampshire is one of the oldest in the entire country. So we have a lot of medical facilities here to cater to the aging population, and it's you know, great healthcare overall. If you're way up in the North Country, it's my understanding that you have to travel a little further. You know, if you live up closer to the Canadian border than the Massachusetts border, you may have to spend a couple hours in the car to get the kind of care you need. But if you're in southern New Hampshire, plenty to choose from, as well as world-class facilities down in Boston. Okay.
We did,
Chris,
just to add to that, we did have a personal doctor. There's a couple out here in the Seacoast. It's like a monthly subscription service, and she's available to us whenever. She does like shots and things like that. So I do know of some like individual options like that as well, at least in the Seacoast region. So I imagine in other parts of the state as well.
Okay. Amy, was there another question that you thought would be appropriate to bring up?
I'll wait for the housing slide.
All right. We talk a lot about housing. That's certainly my specialty, and also Amy. She works with us at Porcupine Real Estate, and Molly and Gordon are clients of mine. You know, they've been through this process buying homes. So we have a lot of different experiences. Some are in the city, some are out in the country. But we get these questions a lot at every big event and every New Movers panel. What's it like to find renting? Well, right now, at this point in time, it's very difficult to find a place to rent in New Hampshire. There is record occupancy rates of near 99% in southern New Hampshire. So it's been frustrating, a bit of a challenge for people moving here from out of state in particular, especially if they want to find a place before they even move. You know, if you don't have a local phone number, if you don't have a job here yet, the landlords in many cases are not going to take you seriously. It's really best to come out here. Maybe you have to stay in an extended stay residence inn, or find an Airbnb for a month while you're searching for your rental. And we do know a number of property managers. Certainly in my business, we deal with a lot of landlords and property managers, and they like to give special dispensation to members of the Liberty community. So even though they might not want to rent to somebody with pets, for example, maybe they'll give you special consideration because you're a free stater, and they're going to expect that you're responsible and going to be a good pet owner and that sort of thing. Amy has a question, I think, in the chat room about housing or rental.
Right. Someone asked how you're able to rent an apartment without weeks of pay stubs to show income.
Okay. First of all, it's very difficult. Most landlords are by the book, and they can afford to be. Right now, as I mentioned, very low vacancy rate. They're going to pick and choose the best tenants with the best job history, best credit, best background check, no pets, things like that. So the only way to get around that is if you don't have the pay stubs or you have bad credit, you're just going to get on the phone and call all the landlords listed in Craigslist, or call me, and I'll try to put you in touch with some landlords that I know who may give you a break just based on the personal connection and the personal reputation. For financing, if you want to buy a house, again, we recommend renting for 6 months to 12 months before you actually buy a place. Figure out where you're going to spend a lot of your time socially, what you like to do with extracurricular activities, what your kids like to do if you have a family, how long your commute is going to be. And then once you're ready to pull the trigger, work with a trusted real estate professional like any of the agents at Porcupine Real Estate, and we'll help you find a place that meets your needs. Maybe you want acreage to shoot on your own property, like Gordon, or maybe you want to be in a city environment like Gabby and me. You know, there's a little bit of something for everybody here. But work with a professional. Quentin, I think, is up north. I don't cover the North Country, but we have a good agent we refer up in the North Country, Coas County, north of the White Mountains. and we'll be happy to put you in touch with the right people there. If you have specific questions on financing, put them in the chat room, or we can talk offline, but know that there are first-time home buyer programs. FHA allows 3.5% down. USDA, which is rural housing, has a program that's 100% financing. In effect, 0 down, and that's a good program for people who have decent credit and maybe have decent income, but haven't saved up a lot of cash. One of the other bullet points on the slide was house hacking, and Constance from our office is going to host her own Zoom seminar like this in a couple weeks, and that will have to do with what we call house hacking, which is when you buy an investment property but you live there, and maybe you rent out a couple of rooms to help pay for the mortgage, or maybe you buy a duplex, rent out the other side, live in one, and this helps you pay the mortgage while building equity and building an investment for future wealth. So we'll have that for you. If you monitor our Facebook page, we'll have details in the near future. We'll also do a shout out to a very helpful website called nhrelocationguide.com. And we have a lot of information there about things we're talking about today, helpful resources, things like that. We also posted on porcupinerealestate.com a number of our blog posts. I'll share the screen with you right now. We blog posts from some past clients, and you'll get to review why they chose around the state. I'm going to mute Sean there. Okay, taxes and politics, a couple of my favorite topics. As we mentioned earlier, property taxes vary widely from town to town. So that's a big consideration when you finally decide to purchase a home. So make sure you work with us. On our website, we'll have a list of all 230 towns and what their tax rates are. And again, if you don't have kids in school, then why pay the high tax rate for that? Let's see. Okay. Let me stop the share right now. Speaking of, because we get a lot of questions about renting and that sort of thing. I know Molly mentioned that she did the short-term winter rental. Gabby, what was your experience when you moved to Manchester? Was it difficult, and how long did it take you to find a place without even having a job lined up?
Yeah, it was actually wasn't that difficult. I think I just applied to one place, and I did have a previous job before moving here, so I was able to use the pay stubs from that job, and I also gave them a letter that let them know of what my income would be when I did get my new job. But it was a fairly smooth transition. They sent me like photos of the apartment. I actually didn't go in the apartment physically because I didn't move yet. And the place that I found was a studio apartment right downtown Manchester. It was a little above, it was like maybe $100 above my budget, but I told myself if I'm only living here for a year, I was able to sacrifice on other things. So for me, it wasn't that difficult, but it was just me. I didn't have any pets. I didn't even have any furniture. So I was looking for a very small place.
For those of you who haven't made the move yet, know that there is a really great Porcupine tradition called the move-in party. And I remember going to Gordon's when his family moved here. Gabby had a very small one because she just had her own car, and everything she had fit in her car.
Yeah.
And then Gordon was helping coordinate these for a long time. And now I think he still helps out, as does Chris Lopez from FSP. But basically, when you move to town, you're gonna have this big truck, and if you provide pizza and soda and beer for the volunteers, you'll just have this flash mob of fellow Free Staters show up and help you unload the truck. It's really a great tradition. It's a lot of fun. You'll get to meet people right off the bat. It's just such a lovely reception, and we hope the people on this call will take advantage of it. If you've already made the move, pay it forward and help out somebody else in the future. Okay, let's talk a little bit about politics. It's one of our slides. I'm very involved in politics. You may know I'm a state rep. It's sort of my third term right now in the legislature, the Hampshire House. Over the years, we've had about 40 free staters get elected to the House. We push it in a very pro-liberty direction. We've passed a lot of great legislation over the years, from reducing the barriers to entry for craft brewers, bringing up what's called the nano brewery license, to jury nullification, to homeschooling education. We have the best gun laws in the country right now with something called constitutional carry, which means no permit, no license, whether you are concealed or open carry, just do it. As long as you're not a convicted felon, that's still against federal law. Other than that, do whatever you want.
There are a couple of caveats to that, but
there are plenty of very active blogs and Facebook groups that will tell you the nuanced details on that. And Gordon will know more about those than I do. But also, we encourage people to get involved locally. Gordon mentioned he joined a local town planning board. As you said, if you just show up to some of these meetings like select board, school board, planning board, zoning board, often if you go twice in a row, they'll come up and say, what are you doing here? If you say, I'm just interested, curious, they're gonna say, well, do you want to join? It happens all the time. But it's a great way for us to be advocates for liberty, to be spokesmen for the liberty message. You're gonna find that a lot of people already agree with that in New Hampshire, especially in the smaller rural towns. But they're always looking for new blood and new energy, and we encourage people to help move us towards liberty in our lifetime by being active at the local level. Every 2 years, the House, the Senate, and the governor are reelected. It's very fluid. We have a very weak governor compared to other states because of that fairly weak legislature. The low barriers to entry, representational House with 400 members, which means you have the smallest number of constituents represented by a state rep of anywhere in the country. It's really fantastic. You only get paid $100 a year, so it's a civic duty, it's a volunteer position, and it means we can't be bought off by lobbyists also. It's really great. Okay, Amy, any questions in the chat room before we go on to talking about education and schooling?
Yeah, we're good.
can I say one thing about the politics?
Please.
So on the local level, and obviously all politics starts out local, a lot of towns, I'm not sure exactly how many, but I know at least my town, on the local level, everything is nonpartisan. So you don't have to worry about ingratiating yourself to a party or even taking part in that whatsoever to get on, planning board or be elected as the town clerk, tax collector, select board, any of that stuff. A lot of towns are completely nonpartisan that way. You can generally kind of tell where somebody's coming at, but you end up, it's much more based on someone's reputation around town and how much they've volunteered and what have they done for the town than it is just the letter before their name. So like in our town, much of this whole area is much higher Democrat enrollment than Republican. But in my town, you end up with 2 people that are obviously Republicans as select board members and 1 Democrat. Because it's not, people don't take that into account so much when they're going to elect their select board. So that's one thing I really appreciate about local politics. I don't know how many towns that's true for, but at least some.
Yeah, that's great input. I got a private message from Quentin who said the budget committee in towns is also can be a very influential position to keep government in check. So there are all sorts of places for us to get involved, and maybe you meet once or twice a month at an evening. It's a small price to pay. We did have some questions in the chat earlier about medical freedom, medical provisions. Quentin also suggested that there are some direct medical care doctors in New Hampshire, and we can post that link to that list later on our Facebook page. Okay, now we want to stay on time, and we wanted to finish in about an hour, but let's take a look at this next slide and really talk a bit about some of the educational opportunities and choices you have in New Hampshire. If you have kids in school, you have lots of choices. Obviously, you can go to government schools, and a lot of them are very good. Some of the school districts are much better than others. Brookline, Hollis, Bow, out where Molly is, and Oyster River School District, Exeter, Concord. Some of these towns have excellent public or government school systems, but also plenty of choices for private schooling, religious schools, and also the charter schools in New Hampshire are pretty darn good. We have a couple Waldorf schools, and other systems. Molly, why don't you tell us about your experience with homeschooling, and then we'll ask Gordon to give us his experience with not only homeschooling, but also finding a good Christian school.
She's muted.
Thank you. You
There you
didn't
go.
unmute me again. Yeah, I was just looking up because I wanted to get the name right. There's a great organization. They're actually the ones like co-hosting the homeschool event tonight at the Praxium. It's called Granite State Home Educators, and they have so much information. What's legally required of you as a homeschooler in New Hampshire. And that's really been our go-to homeschooling the kids. So there are private schools, like Mark mentioned, around here. But for us, there are some charter as well. There's a lot of I've noticed a lot of newer ones kind of starting up, like that have maybe like 1 or 2 days a week where you can, take the kids for certain, they'll cover like certain areas of interest. So those are really interesting also for us as homeschoolers. But yeah, so if you're interested in how to get started, like where do you start? Because it's so different. And coming from California to New Hampshire, it was so different. The Granite State Home Educators is definitely where you're going to want to start to get all that information figured out.
That's a great resource, yeah. Thank you. And as far as I know, the reporting requirement is minimal, right? You just tell the state once when your kids would normally start school, you say to the state, sorry, we're going to homeschool, and you don't have to re-up every year. You just tell them once for the life of the student, is my understanding.
Yeah, and you can register them. Well, you send it to like a local school, to a nearby school. It can be a public school if you want it to, or you can go to a private school and then they don't report it to the state. So that's what we've kind of sought out, a private school in a nearby town, and send them our letter, our intent to homeschool, and sorry about that. And that's pretty much it. At the end of the year, there are like you can either have like a portfolio, or you can have you can do an assessment. You can have a person come in, a teacher or somebody like that who runs the assessment, or you can do what we did last year, was just did a standardized test. We ordered it online and we had it. It was pretty easy. Sorry, my kids just came home from Grandma and Grandpa's house, so there's a little excitement going on. But yeah, that's where we're at with that.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing. Gordon, what was the experience for you and your wife with Annabelle when searching for private schools?
Everything has been really easy in New Hampshire, especially compared to New York, where we're originally from. One thing I wanted to note that I found out recently, we have a Waldorf school, the Monadnock Waldorf School, which is just south of us here, that they never even closed. It's my understanding they never even closed during the whole COVID thing. So it's a big thing that a lot of the regulations that the state does have on schools don't actually apply to the private schools. So when the state shut down all the public schools, the private schools didn't actually have to shut down, and some of them didn't. So as for our experience, I've never had a single interaction with the state of New Hampshire when it comes to educating my daughter. We sent her to a private Christian school for preschool, and then she went to a different private Christian school here in Keene to start out. And then we decided we were traveling a lot and we were going to do homeschooling. So we just wrote a very simple letter. I found a form letter online. It was probably Granite State Home Educators. I was going to mention them as well. And just sent them the letter and said, we're going to homeschool now. And that was it. And so we did that for a couple of years, and then she went back to Trinity. And that's where she's at now. And now we're trying to decide where she's going to go, depending on what all the schools implement for rules as it pertains to COVID. And I'll stop there and go shut my dog up.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Gabby, let's talk about higher education a little bit. I know there are a lot of places in New Hampshire, and you work for one, so feel free to give a plug if you want.
Sure. So there are a variety of options when it comes to universities. New Hampshire is a highly educated state. A large portion of the population has at least a bachelor's degree. There is the state university system. So you have like Keene State University, UNH, a variety of different ones across the state. And then you have an Ivy League school. Dartmouth is here in New Hampshire. And you also have very innovative higher education opportunities. So Southern New Hampshire University, they do have a campus. Their campus is actually closed for the fall due to COVID, but they have a large online student population. So if you are someone who is looking to pursue higher education, or you have children who are preparing, or teenagers who are preparing to go to college, you have a variety of options, but I'm just going to suggest online is perfect for the times. So yeah, lots of opportunities here to learn.
That is great. Thank you for sharing. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up in just a moment. There was another question that popped up asking about veterinary services. And if Gordon has any experience out in rural areas, how available that is, he can chime in. But here in Manchester, here in Manchester, there are plenty of vets. In fact, we even have a freestater who's a vet who works for a place here in Manchester. So, if you want a Liberty treatment, Molly knows who it is. If you want a Liberty veterinarian, then come to Manchester and get it done. If you're talking large animals like horses, obviously that's not a problem here too. There are a fair amount of horse properties in the rural areas of New Hampshire, so you're well covered there. Okay, Amy, any other questions before we wrap up?
No, I think you got most of them.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring up this last screen share, and I want to thank you guys all for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. We want to thank our panelists for sharing their insights and experiences. This call will be recorded, and there'll be a link available later on if you want to watch it or fast forward to some of the parts to where you get some of the specific questions or some of the links in the slides. And then you can see here we have porcupinerealestate.com and nhrelocationguide.com, which really specialize in giving people the resources and information they need to hit the ground running when they move to New Hampshire or to help find a place. And I think it's been a lot of fun. So thank you all very much. Thanks, Amy, for co-hosting. Thank you to our panelists, and especially for all you guys for tuning in. Be free.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.